Hello, welcome to another Sonic Lab. Today we're looking at the StudioLive 3242 AI. This is the granddaddy of the StudioLive range from Presonus. And what it basically is a live mixing desk, digital of course, all recallable. It's got, this is the big one, it's the 32 channel one. So it's got 32 Xmax preamps, which are Presonus' sort of high range, high resolution preamps. But it's also got a 48 in, 34 out Firewire interface card. So you can basically flip inputs and have multiple Firewire returns coming in. Having said that, it is very much geared towards live. First couple of things, obviously no moving faders on the Presonus stuff, but you can store the level of the faders and match them using the meters across here. That goes into a certain mode. You can go into fader locate. If you see, I'm moving faders and you can see these ones are not as they should be. Now the Presonus StudioLive AI also has this active integration, which means you can hook it up to a network either via the included Wi-Fi dongle, or there's an Ethernet port on the back in the expansion card, and that allows you to hook it up via your iPad app, iPhones, and it allows various members of the band or whoever to work on their own monitor mixes and what have you, because it's got a lot of auxiliary sends. It's got 14 auxiliary sends, so you can have monitor mixes, effect sends, all of that kind of stuff. So across the top we've got discrete gain control for all 32 inputs, 48 volt switchable per channel, nice to see that, that's discrete. And also we've got this input which allows you to take the return channel from either Firewire, or if there are going to be some other boards that, you know, maybe Dante or whatever, Maddie, so you can switch the returns. And this is actually really cool. This is actually one of the big deals because it allows you, using the built-in software, which is Capture 2, because you can record all the direct channels directly from the rig into very simple return recording software and then play it back. So you can flip, effectively giving you that live Soundcheck vibe. So this and a laptop, you know, you've essentially got that notion to be able to do the virtual sound checks. So you could just flip the live input from last night's gig or the rehearsal or whatever, play it in, tune the room, you're done. Right, continuing on, obviously these are all the auxiliary controls and effects returns. Metering, we've got this large input channel meter. This is multi-purpose. This essentially is the fat channel. This is the kind of core of the way of working, because the way that the StudioLive works is you select a channel, and it shows you each of these represents a section of the fat channel. So in this section here, which is at the far left, we've got the gate, allows to switch it on. We've got the parameters, key filter, threshold, range, attack, release, and also a high pass filter. I'll select that channel. Then we've got the compressor and limiter, which again allow you to set the various settings. You use these rotary encoders, which are multi-purpose for setting those values, and you switch it on and off or go into auto mode or soft mode. And we've also got an additional limiter at the end of that. Then we've got the EQ section. This is a 4-band section which allows you to switch individual bands on and off, or the whole thing, which is actually very useful in many ways. Again, the only thing I don't like about this is, in terms of what the frequency is, there are obviously points between the ones on this meter. It would have been really good if it was possible to have the readout simultaneously value on the screen here, so I can now dial in a specific frequency. And finally, as we come along here, we've also got a set of 6 mute groups, 6 mix scenes, and then the master section and the final metering here. So it is possible to switch this into, as I say, full metering mode, or goes to fat channel mode, or it can be the output meters or gain reduction for particular channels, or auxiliary metering. And again, this is the fader locate situations. Each subgroup also has a fat channel, so you can add compression gate, equalizer, and what have you on it. Then finally, when we get to the stereo channel, we've got a graphic equalizer, which allows us to draw in a curve. In fact, graphic EQ is available on every single auxiliary output as well, making it ideal for setting up monitors and ringing them out and having them set up so you don't get any feedback. And this, again, is all storable by scene. So looking on the back of the mixer, we can see that each channel has discrete mic input, line input, and insert point across all 27 to 28 across the top, and then we've got the additional 29, 30, 32 right there. Coming back here, we've also got a talkback input with a level mic, a mono output, Main left and right output with a pad, a trim setting, which is really handy. Main output on balanced jacks, tape in and out, control room outputs, auxiliary inputs A and B, subgroup outputs individually, plus 14 auxiliary outputs. Additionally, we've got D-type outputs so that we can patch up direct outputs for pre-EQ, pre-insert balanced direct outputs. So you might want to use that for like a split to a broadcast or any other stuff. So that's handy to have those on those D-types. Finally, we've got the included expansion card, which is the Firewire 800, the Ethernet control port, which we use for the AI interface, plus an SPDIF output. Mains power, 100 to 230 volts with dedicated switch. I'd like to have seen that a bit more recessed actually. It's something that you could knock quite easily if you weren't careful. So let's run some sound through it. And what I've got is a drum session, drum and bass, which I've used on reviews of another couple of desks. That's just coming out the Firewire of the MacBook Pro here, directly into the StudioLive, and then onto the return channels here. So let's start with the kick. This is what it sounds like naked. See, I've got the selected channel. Put the gate on to get rid of a bit of the bleed, stick the compressor on, starts to fatten up a bit, stick the EQ on, starts to sound like a kick. One thing I will say though, it would have been awesome to be able to have some sort of metering here certainly in the gate and the compression to show what was going on. As it stands, we've got to look over here to the gain reduction meter, which is, you know, it is fine in itself, but it just takes a bit of getting used to. Also, I can press the gain reduction button so that the metering then just shows the gain reduction for each individual channel. So let's bring some more stuff on. We've got overheads, hi-hat, and that started to sound all right. I mean, the one thing I did do also is I sent the kick and the snare to subgroup 1, and subgroup 1 is over here, and that's also got a fat channel, that's got a bit of compression and an EQ. So if I now switch that out, bring the kit back in, starting to sound kind of quite happening. And then I've also got this bass channel, which I like the sound of, and we can listen, if we just listen to the way that that sounds for a second, illustrate another feature. So I've got this EQ, which I quite like. I've also got this Alt button, which is an AB button effectively, so I've got two setups. So I'm currently in A, and if I want to go to B, I might want to say, let's take this out and make it really just extremely different, so like that. Okay, so now I've got a sound which is sort of radically different, but I can switch it back. So what that essentially means is if I need to flip the sound of a particular channel, I can do that very quickly with the AB button without having to maybe recall an entire scene. So that's actually quite a neat feature. So the one thing I would say is I've used this session on a couple of other desk reviews, and I'm sort of used to the way that it sounds. Now, when I plugged it into this and just brought the phase up, there was a sort of depth and a clarity to it and something a little bit extra, which is kind of hard to fathom because obviously we're coming in digitally, we're not listening to any mic amps or anything, but the actual sound of the DSP or the algorithms or whatever it may be just has a little bit extra, shall I say. It just seems to have more weight and smack and kind of clarity to it, which is a good thing, right? But while we're here, we should actually have a listen to the Xmax Preamp. I'll run up a mic now and we can have a listen to that. So now we're just listening to the naked sound of the SE Electronics Voodoo VR1 ribbon mic coming straight in. It's a very smooth, even sound. So if we come to our channel here, let's maybe try a bit of roll off. 1, 2, 2, 2, 2. So I can obviously affect that. It's quite a smooth filter. We'll leave it there for the time being. Just come in and stick my stick the compressor on. I've got it in auto mode. Let's bring the threshold right down, maybe give it a bit of more hype. Come across to the EQ. Let's just take all of those bands out. I'm going to add a bit of extra hype to it there as well. Maybe I'll really go for it. And then I added a bit of extra mid and some more bottom end. So now you can hear, if I bring the compression, like really dial the compression in, maybe don't go into auto mode, I can crank the gain up a bit and get this kind of bitten take the ratio right up, bang, bang, bang. Maybe try a limiter in it as well. Just really overdo it. Go into auto, do it. we can get some real sort of effects style compression going on there. And for a ribbon mic, I mean, these don't have very high output. I've got probably, well, that's close to 9/10 gain on there, and there's very little additional noise going on. One thing's worth mentioning, we don't have any form of pad on the input, which I'm guessing if we've got some really hot signals might be an issue. So before we move on, there's a couple of things we should look at with channels. In this section here, we've got channel, copy, load and save. Now basically these buttons allow me to copy and paste channels and also save and recall channels, and this is how it works. Say I've got my kick here, I want to copy this channel. I maybe want to paste that fat channel to this one, this one, this one, maybe even a couple of auxiliaries, why ever not, and a bus, what the hell, and then load. Now all of those fat channel settings are the same. Additionally, if I want to load a channel from the internal library, I can now, I've got my sub 2 selected, I can load the fat channel from any one of these 99 presets. If I want to save a channel, pressing save, I can now just save it in any one of these 99 presets. I can change the category, which is great for sort of just narrowing things down, and I've got access to the name for that particular preset as well. Then I just hit store and I'm done. So probably time to have a listen to perhaps some of the effects, because there are 4 built-in effects engines here, and see what the DSP is like for that kind of stuff. So back to the ribbon mic. Let's see what we've got. We've got that 1, 2, fairly, yeah, we'll keep it fairly flat for now, just a bit of EQ on it. Basically, I'll start with 1, 2, 2, 2. This is small room. We've got various different, we can change. We've got these algorithms. 1 and 2 are sort of generally ambient speaking. Then on number 2, we've got a plate. So come down here, you can get the plate to be a bit longer. 1. Not much going on. Not much going on in the editing, just decay and pre-delay. Then on this guy, we've got mono delay. We've got 2, which seems to be about 4 seconds. We can tap that, that's kind of handy. So we can tap it, and then on number 4, I've got a, what have I got? Ping pong delay, which is probably quite long. So ping pong delay, 1, 2, there we go, that's a bit better. 1, 2, there we go, that's a bit better. So they're not mind-blowing effects. It's handy to have them. I mean, no modulation, nothing fancy. I mean, you're really going to have to rely on either external gear or the possibility of maybe running it through your DAW and running some plugins in there, which maybe your laptop might be free for that, but that's always a possibility to bust stuff out and in. Obviously you won't necessarily want to be doing that for real-time stuff like compression and things, but certainly for ambience and perhaps other modulation effects, things like that, it might be viable. I mean, one thing that does come to light from this, it very much is an in and out kind of desk. Not, lots of digital desks have all sorts of routing possibilities and all that sort of thing. Not so on the 32 or any of the Presonus stuff. Channel comes in and goes out via buses. You've got the opportunity to route and take the inputs over Firewire, but that's it. You can't sort of say assign input number 1 to channel number X or Y. None of that stuff. And for that point, it actually makes it much simpler to use. If we come to the system menu, you can see pretty much what we've got access to. If I go right to the top of the system, we can change things like the LCD contrast, the backlit, solo mode, latch, show peak hold, global aux mutes. Then we've got the networking features. We'll discuss that a little bit later. Networking permissions. Then the ability to set all of the pre and post for each of the 14 auxiliaries. Again, for the effects A through D, and the sample rate of the console, which can be 44.1 or 48, and then the SPDIF out, which can basically mirror subgroups through to auxiliary sends and effects sends. So that gives what we're listening to here, by the way, is the output of the desk is coming via SPDIF into another console, the Yamaha DM1000, which is an older style console, and then into the cameras. Then we've got the ability to delay subgroups up to 300 milliseconds. This is actually quite handy for someone like me who does lots of internet broadcasting where you've got cameras being delayed and audio being delayed via Skype and things. It means that we can line things up. Same if you're in a live scenario, you've got front of house speakers there and maybe you've got a delay cluster behind you called a delay cluster because you need to delay it by a few milliseconds so that it lines up with the front of house. So the people behind are hearing the sound of these speakers at the same time as they hear the sound of the front of house speakers. So it lets you, incorporate that kind of stuff into your system. And finally, we've also got the ability to lock various aspects of the console, and then finally this is just the firmware. Now if we come down to the scene memory, we've got the ability to, when we're storing and saving scenes, we can recall the names, the assigns, the pots, the graphic EQs, etc. So we can basically granularize it, and that's very much again geared up to a live scenario, because what you don't want to do is if you've got your mix set up and you've had to ring out the monitor, so you've got different graphic EQs across the auxiliaries, you really don't want to change that when you're changing patches if you've got to change a patch through the mix, so that those sort of things can remain constant. We should probably take a look now at the applications that come with the StudioLive and see how they would maybe tie into a live setup. Okay, so there's two ways to hook up. It comes with a little Wi-Fi dongle, which is this little fella here, and that just goes in the USB slot, which you can also use for firmware updates. But what I did is I plugged in the Ethernet cable just into my regular router, which means it got assigned an address. So now I go to my iPad, I'm going to use the StudioLive Remote AI, and it's detected that there is a desk on the network. So hit that, and now it should connect. So what I have here are a reflection of all my channels, and the really cool thing, if I just press, you can see it's also got the metering, which is a small thing, but actually kind of gives you confidence that something is going on. So now that enables me to, if I want to mute these channels, then nothing's happening. So, this is all real-time stuff, and you can see on the desk what's going on. And the connection latency seems to be pretty good. So now that gives me access to things like the fat channel, so I can tweak the, if I select that, I tweak the threshold, and you can see it's updating live on the desk. All of that good stuff is all there. You'll also notice that I've got the channels are named, and that means because I can name, basically, you can probably just about make it out, the control, so I can name the channels here, which adds a little bit of extra functionality there. If I go to my system menu, it sees that my iPad is connected, and I can give it permissions. So I can give it permissions to be front of house, which means it'll do everything. Or I can say I just want auxiliaries or auxiliary 1 or 2. So if you watch the iPad update, you can see that's not grayed out. I can give it auxiliary 1. So now if I go to maybe my auxiliary 1, I go to my aux mixer, you can see that I now have access to auxiliary 1 only. That iPad has that permission. It means I can set my mix up. Presumably this would correspond to my, my wedge or whatever. So I can set it all up. I've got access to all of the channels, and they're all named here, which helps me figure it out. And I can't access anything else. Additionally, with auxiliaries, I've got the possibility to get hold of I've got a fat channel for each of the auxiliaries as well. I've also got the possibility of accessing an EQ, but also graphic EQ. And the graphic EQ is what would you traditionally use to ring out your monitors, and that allows me, I can just flatten that. Let's flatten it, and then I might be able to kind of go draw a little bit in. I've got. So obviously the other thing we've got to go along with that is the AI integration with the computer. So let's take a look. So here's my drum session here. I'm just going to load the Universal Control AI interface. Picks it up over Firewire. We'll connect to that one. And here we've got a great representation, very similar to the iOS device. We can look at the fat channel for each selected channel. We've got graphic EQs for all the auxes, the left and right, and all that sort of things. And we've got the ability to look at the RTA output as well. So we've got a real-time analysis across those. And the spectrograph, what does it look like? That's what it looks like. Very pretty. So the other thing that we've got here is a browser. It allows us to save and recall fat channels, whole scenes, fat channels, effects, graphic EQ, and also back stuff up. And this is quite neat because it means that if I like, say, my bass guitar, which I'll select here, I can store that simply by adding the plus sign here. So I'm just going to go, well, I've already stored one for bass, but I'll store another one. So now I've got my preset here, but I've got in the device, I've got all of these other presets here, which I can check out. So I could maybe take an electric bass. Let's see what that sounds like. If I drop that onto this channel, see what that sounds like. Come back to my... Yeah, I quite like that. It's better than mine, although my kick and snare were better, I'd just like to say. But it gives you that extra granularity that's harder to access via the front panel, and that's actually pretty neat. Obviously, additionally, there's the Capture 2 software, which is the tracking software, which is kind of low footprint tracking system, and that enables us also to set it up to do virtual sound check. So let's take a look at that as well. So we'll just load Presonus Capture here. This is running on my MacBook Pro. We can create a new recording, new session. We can select the device. Obviously, we've got built-in output, but this one's Presonus. We can set the sample rate. I think that's tied to the session. We can have a new session, or we can just go record now. So I guess that one would be nice and quick. So we can set the artist. This will be Sonic. Performance will be Review. Location will be Sonic Towers. So all this information gets stored. Record now, so it's just straight in, and that is really neat. I'm going to stop that there. Actually, this has got lock recording, which means it's not easy to stop it recording once you've started. I don't actually want all of these in record. It's probably not something I need. Let's just take a look at the settings. So we've got audio device. We can set the timeline sync mode. This is actually quite useful. These are 24-bit WAV files, pre-record buffer. So we can set it to computer time or MIDI timecode. So basically, if we do that, then the timestamp becomes the time of the computer. Several different modes. What I'll do is I'll just roll up to, I've got channel 24 here. Let me just roll this up. 24, there we go. So this is, if I now get my mic, so we can see now we've got a live input. I can set the metering to be much more sort of verbose, so we've got a lot to see. That seems like quite a good level. So you can imagine across multiple inputs, very quick just to see. And then we've got the ability for live sound check. And live sound check means I can play the stuff back into the input channels and, you know, from what I've recorded. So this is the virtual sound check. That's really cool. So some other cool things we could do, if we drop the meters down, we've got the ability to drop markers in on the fly. We've got the ability to bring the mix control into the computer. What that basically does is import all the fat channel settings from the desk into the session. So if I were then to take the session and load it into Studio One, which is obviously Presonus' major sort of DAW environment, the fat channel is replicated there. So you can play back the mix as it's set up on your desk, and also, you know, continue to tweak and add to it. It's also possible to export presets from Studio One into the host computer file structure, which is then read by the AI app, which you can browse and drag onto the live channel of the StudioLive mixer again. So one thing that I should probably reiterate is the workflow. I mean, in use, this desk is very similar in feel to an analog console, and for many people that will be very appealing, because digital desks by their very nature can be complex, and the fact that we've got one channel per fader on this makes it very easy to sort of reach and grab and mute in a live situation when, in fact, you know, there's not much time to think which layers it on, flip the fader. So that is a very appealing thing. There's also the added fact that it's got what sounds to me like a more impressive sound than other digital desks I've looked at in many ways. Slightly wider, slightly deeper, more clarity. And I think that's in part due to the Burr Brown converters that they use, which are high-end A to Ds. Plus, even with the Firewire coming in, there was something about the sound that made me think, oh, this session sounds a bit better than I remember it on other desks that I've reviewed. So who's going to be using it? Well, I know in the US, there are a lot of applications for this in houses of worship, and I know this sort of stuff is very popular there. And if you're looking for something for your house of worship, then this is definitely something you want to consider if you've got the budget. The only thing I would say is, if perhaps you're thinking about it for an on-the-road scenario, is there is no audio networking capability just yet, which means that you can't run Cat5 to a remote stage box, although Presonus do say that there are ones in the pipeline, so they should be coming quite soon, so you could run maybe Dante or something. So is it worth the extra premium? Because this is a more expensive desk than some of the competition. I would say if the workflow is very important to you and sound, you should definitely try this out. If you're not so bothered about that and you want kind of all sorts of configuration, maybe you're going to use it more in a studio environment, then perhaps you might want to look elsewhere. But the thing to remember about this is you can record directly into it very simply and then bring that through if you're a Studio One user and bring in all the fat channels. That's quite an appealing concept. Then you're straight out. And if you're selling product as a band on the road, that could be pretty cool. So in terms of pricing, as I said, it's premium. The 3242 is about 3,200 or so UK pounds. Prices will vary if you shop around. There's also a 2442 and a 1642 if you don't need so many channels. The other thing there is the 1602, which is the non-AI version. And the AI stuff really is quite appealing, you know, with the iPad integration and the integration with, if you've got Presonus speakers, the whole system can talk to itself, sort out the delays and what have you. And that's very appealing too. So if you want to go that extra mile, you've got a little bit of extra budget and your sound and the workflow are really important to you, definitely worth checking out the Presonus AI range.